concert, and there were rumors circulating that there were P5R and P5S as two things that were in development simultaneously, and everyone was like, holy shit, what's going to happen here? And the assumption was that P5R was going to be something along the lines of what Royal became, something kind of like Persona 4 Golden, and that P5S was going to be a Persona 5 like vanilla port for the Switch, and that like it's possible that the Switch might never see whatever the like Golden or Royal version of that game is, but you're still getting Persona 5 on the Switch, and that's amazing. And that was like the going rumor for like a couple weeks leading up to what ended up being what you're about to talk about.
Yeah, so then they're like, no, it is a game called Persona 5 Scramble, which is a Dynasty Warriors Musou game with Persona 5 characters. So like,
for the Nintendo Switch.
For the Nintendo Switch, the excitement kind of waned. And it's worth clarifying before we get into that. You and I both like Musou games a lot. I think that they've been really interesting, especially in more recent years. And more on that in a bit, because, you know, we played this game. But, like, you know, it was disappointing. But then, like, at least for me, a few weeks later, I was like, you know what? I'm such a big fan of Persona 5 that just the idea of, like, playing as the full roster and fighting hordes of enemies, like, will be fun. Like, I will definitely find the fun in a game like that.
Yeah.
Then they're like, oh, it's only in Japan. And it's like, oh, okay. So is it coming to Switch in the US ever? And then they released a survey email saying, do you want this on Switch? And it's like, what is happening?
Yeah.
What did Joker coming into Smash mean? Nothing? I guess so. And again, you know, this is, again, all ice cream, but it was just like a very bizarre, like, series of events that led to general confusion. That being said, even when Scramble came out in Japan, the critics who were able to play it and the reviews from Japan were very positive. Like, there was already like a lot of positivity looming around that game, and I've been very excited to finally play it. Fast forward to now, it's released in the US as Persona 5 Strikers on both PS4, PS5, and Nintendo Switch. You have it on Switch, I have it on PS4, and it is absolutely incredible. It is so far beyond what I thought it was going to be. If I had to give just a quick elevator pitch, which I sometimes enjoy trying to put my thoughts into, it is much less what I thought it was going to be, which was a Musou game with Persona 5 characters and flair. And it is basically a Persona game with different combat. So, like, the experience you were getting is largely, with some things scaled down. I think the biggest thing that's missing is, like, you're not really getting the day-to-day life sim. And there's no, like, time limit, and there's no, like, direct kind of, like, I'm gonna spend time with this character to get their story. But that being said, like, there's a lot of story here, and the first thing you're gonna get when playing this game is just, like, excitement to be back with these characters that you love so much. It really feels like the first feeling I got playing this game was like when you watch a movie based on your favorite TV show or cartoon. You're like, oh my god, it's my friends, they're on the big screen. Like, you can hear the internal audience applause whenever characters show up in this game. Like, when Sojiro, like, lurks on the camera, you're like, yeah! You know, like, at least that was me. It's really incredible.
The thing that I have found so interesting about this game, well, first of all, let me just say, I'm also, like, completely fucking blown away by this game. It is ridiculous good. And a lot of that comes down to the fact that it is more Persona than it is a Musou game. But one of the interesting things I think, and I didn't realize this until I looked it up, I was like, okay, who made this game, though? I was really curious. And the name of the company is Omega Force, and looking at the list of games that they've made, it is just, they make every Musou game. Like, every single one is them. And it's clear that in recent years, almost weirdly like the Pokemon franchise at this point, is like they have been iterating very, very slowly towards something that is like a successful kind of formula that they can just improve upon as time goes on. They made Hyrule Warriors, and then they made Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, which I'm sure you were going to bring up at some point, which was like received in a mostly mixed way, you know? It's a game that like has a lot of the flair of Breath of the Wild that people wanted, but was, you know, really, really mainly focused on just like being a Musou game first and foremost, with some Breath of the Wild stuff added to it. Specifically a story that I think was a little bit blown out of proportion in terms of like how much it was going to actually connect to the canon of Breath of the Wild. It was very much pitched as like, this is a prequel to that game, and if you want the full scope of the story, you're going to have to play Age of Calamity, and it turns out that's not really the case. So I kind of went into this game expecting a similar thing. What I was not expecting is exactly what you just put in your elevator pitch, which is like, this is a sequel to Persona 5. Like, just straight up, it's just remove turn-based combat and put in Musou fighting. And that is like it. That is the video game. And I am so happy that that's it is, because it is really, really successful at being a Persona game, and also is really fun when it becomes a Musou game. But I think the thing that they really nailed, at least in like the early hours that I've experienced, that it feels like they're striking that balance in a way that makes me feel like I'm playing Persona. I've really loved it. The only reason I haven't played more of it is because I wanted to play it enough to talk about it on the episode. But I'm excited to go back and play more of it. You've played it for more hours than I have.
Yeah, I'm like towards the end of what is the first palace, basically. And I think the reason it's so successful too with the Musou combat, which I have a lot more to say, but I think like in a broad stroke, a lot of Musou games are kind of like this sort of map where there are different control points, and you have to like there are almost like a MOBA. There are like two hordes of armies kind of constantly fighting with or without you, and you as whatever character, you know, let's say Age of Calamity, like this kind of work this way, where you could be Sheik or no, I'm sorry, Zelda or Impa or Link, and you run over there and you like fight a horde of enemies, maybe a boss, and you clear the area, and then they're like, oh, this space is under attack. So it's a lot of like a test of efficiency over necessarily difficulty of battle. Usually you're like unmatched. Usually you're just like, it's a power fantasy of sorts.
Yeah.
What's so brilliant about Persona 5 Strikers is that it's not that. It is designed literally like a Persona 5 Palace would, but replace random encounters with like you're doing the same thing where you see shadows represented as these like kind of lurking creatures, and you sneak up on them, you get the upper hand when the battle starts, and there's like a big group of enemies that spawn. And battles are over quick. So I think the point of tension with a lot of Musou games is that they can feel repetitive sometimes, and this game does not, so far at least. You know, the battles are either over really quick or they're really tough and you're like on the edge of your seat. And I think this feels less like Dynasty Warriors, and honestly it feels more like a 7 remake in that it is like a very clever mashup of real-time combat with the RPG mechanics. You know, you can hold R1 to summon your Persona and action freeze, selecting ability, and similar to the core game, you know, if they're weak to it, you can then do an all-out attack. And weirdly enough, this game in real time feels almost more true to the spirit of Persona 5 than the turn-based did.
This was going to be my like later in this conversation hot take, but I think I actually I personally am connecting more with the Musou stuff in this game than I did with the turn-based combat in Persona 5. In a way that I very much wasn't expecting, because I do think you're right. I think it actually kind of nails a little bit more the actual like fear of the like espionage and the sneaking of those palaces in Persona 5, because when things go wrong, which, you know, they have to constantly when you're like trying to pull off a heist, you are flooded with enemies. And I think in Persona 5 and Royal, what they do to kind of highlight that, or what they do to kind of get around that, because they have to do turn-based combat, is like you'll have a little cutscene that shows you getting attacked by a lot of people, but when you're in the actual combat, it's really not that many. And this game is actually showing you the thing that Persona 5 proper is alluding to. And I think that's been a really compelling and like a really kind of like visually shocking shift for me, and has made me more invested in the process of infiltrating these palaces.
It's so exciting. It's really thrilling. Like every character plays differently too, and like doing the baton pass is as easy as just hitting a direction on the control pad. So like you might like do a few slashes with Joker, cast a spell the enemy's weak to, high five Ryuji, and he does like a shockwave attack. Like, and it's hard, and it's hard to design this game without it feeling too fluffy or light. Like this is really what Kingdom Hearts 3 should have felt like. That's like what I keep thinking. Is like Kingdom Hearts 3 felt like nothing I did actually mattered. I'm gonna win no matter what. Every 5 seconds I can summon a Disney ride. It doesn't make any sense. It means nothing. But this game is like equally chaotic, but every decision really matters in a way that like the momentum of a fight can go wildly either your way or the enemy's way, just like in the turn-based combat, but it's in the moment. And you're given more options where like you're literally leveling up your Persona in the same exact way. Like they're getting abilities, you know, they can only have so many, you know, I can use elemental attack on a field of them or heal or whatever. But you're also unlocking combos in a more traditional Musou way for all the characters. But like they've done a really good, they've done such a good job making every character play uniquely. That was something that was good about Age of Calamity as well. Every character felt very unique. Yeah, there was definitely a little bit of a balance that you're like, you're playing as Impa and you're wiping out everything, and Zelda is like given like a big magnet. It's like, why is this not on the same level? But like in Persona 5, like I've been really enjoying playing. My advice is actually to like try to stick to a few characters and like learn them, because it can be I will say this, the game throws a lot at you, and if you don't have a working knowledge of Persona combat, it could be very overwhelming.
Yeah.
And it's a tough game, and actually I think that's good, because Musou games can, if they're too easy, it lacks the like sort of stakes that it wants to evoke by these
I
cores.
was gonna ask, what difficulty are you playing on?
I'm playing on normal, and the first like mini boss you face is like very tough. Like it's the wall. Like most fights will be over in an instant, but like the bosses are actually very tough. And there are optional.
Are you talking about the like horse goat thing?
No.
Oh, okay.
That's like, yeah. There is a like mini boss proper later on. That's a big zombie later in the
Okay, yeah,
boss.
I haven't hit that yet.
There are also enemies that are like they're like blue, and Futaba's like, oh shit, these are like really tough. Only take them on if you think you can. I'm like, I can do it. I've been doing pretty well. I got ruined in like less than 10 seconds. Like,
wow.
One-shotted everyone. So like, there's similar to Persona 5 where you can have those like optional really tough fights. They exist within this game in the Musou combat, but I've been really enjoying playing as Ryuji, the new characters Sophia and Makoto. Because Ryuji just has this bat that has like such a good impact with it. Joker's a lot of fun, as you would expect, because you already have like an idea of how he would play given Smash Brothers.
Yeah, and he can, as in the main game, can switch his personas at will, which allows you to like mess with different elements. So I'm glad that carried over. I just want to mention also that I'm playing on casual mode, and I've had a really good time. Like it's kind of played a little bit more like every other Musou game I've played in terms of the combat, but like you said, it's over very quickly and allows me to just like fly through the story in a way that I'm actually like perfectly.
Let me know how it is when you get to where I am, because that's where like it's suddenly.
Yeah, I'm actually really curious. I can double back. We can make like a note of that. I can double back and kind of give an update on how that feels.
But I think it's a good thing. I think it really kind of makes you like have to use, because if all these tools and information didn't matter, it would be fluff. But the fact that you actually have to like lock in and really make sense of like when you're switching and why, I think is really important. Sophia's very fun with her like yo-yo attacks, and Makoto has a combo where she hops on her motorcycle and just like hits a crowd of enemies. It's just incredible. Like. It is so fun, and I think my theory is that, you and I both like think that this combat is like at least comparable, maybe even if not better than the original game. I think this feels like a test bed for whatever the next Persona game is, being a mesh with real time and turn-based. Like if they want to go in a more FF7 remake approach to it,
yeah.
I think they're like testing that out with this.
I would be really curious to see if they actually make that switch, because something about at least the history of Atlas makes me think they'd be able to like load to get rid of their like tried and true turn-based stuff, but we're seeing it so often, like Square Enix doing it with the Final Fantasy franchise, as we just saw with Sega doing it with Yakuza Like a Dragon, literally the inverse, taking the game from a beat 'em up into a turn-based combat thing. I would love to see that with the Persona franchise proper, but I think in here it is really, really working for me, and I think that's a great point that it feels more like Final Fantasy VII Remake than most of the game. I'm right there with you, actually. I haven't been really good. It really does feel that way, and I think that's why it's clicking for me so well.
And there are some fun arcade moments too, like if the enemy gets the upper hand, you get knocked down, and you have to like wiggle the joystick to get back on your feet. So like it just has a lot of what you want from a game like this. In regards to like potentially the next Persona game being more real-time focused, not necessarily exactly this. I think the reason this succeeds is because while it's not the tried and true turn-based formula, they're still using all the things that are in that combat.
Yeah.
It's just a different interpretation of it. And I think kind of like how Pokemon is doing this thing where they've got the Diamond and Pearl remakes on one branch and they've got the Legends on another. If I'm correct in assuming that there's an interest in experimenting with the next Persona game, they're also making a new S&T game, for the Switch. So I wonder if S&T is going to be the series that remains like, here is the classic turn-based, all the same enemies, all the same items game, and Persona, because it's become, kind of their flagship series, even over S&T, will be the one to kind of like veer in different directions.
Yeah, and I do think the concerted effort they're making towards having Shin Megami Tensei 5 come out on the Nintendo Switch and worldwide might actually lend credence to that as a potential future for them, which I think would be really, really cool. I think that'd be a really interesting move. because it's worth noting. So this game was developed by Omega Studio, who, as I mentioned, like makes every Musou game, but in conjunction with P Studio, the Persona division of Atlas. So like they worked in tandem to make this game, and I think you might be right. It might be a case of like them trying to learn from Omega Studio in terms of like, what it's like to make a real-time action combat game. That's a really cool idea. I would love to see that. I would really love to.
You can even see the interest in core Persona 5 because the core Persona 5, the dungeon, because you know, on a core level, Persona is half life sim, half dungeon crawler.
Yeah.
And in 3 and 4, the dungeon crawling element feels very like classic. It's you roaming a randomly determined floor, avoiding enemies, finding items. It might be like styled in a fun way.
Yeah.
But it's that at its best. Whereas Persona 5 had these like almost Zelda dungeons that were designed in a predetermined way that really focused on stealth. And I think actually that's where this game I think is objectively more successful. Like you said before, the stealth and the action, like, you know, jumping on, you know, getting verticality and swinging on ropes and all that kind of like Indiana Jones heist stuff in the core game felt like kind of just it was there because they wanted it to be. Whereas this game, it feels like it serves better utility. Like even in the combat, there's a great mechanic where if you're playing as one character, other characters in your party will suggest an action that you can just hit on the D-pad and they'll do it.
Yeah.
So like while your Joker is fighting, you might be low on health. Sophia might be like, I can help, and she'll be on top of this like crate attached by balloons, and she'll cut it, and that will drop on a horde of enemies. Like that stuff is so cool.
And as you mentioned before, that feels exactly like what Kingdom Hearts should have been, because Kingdom Hearts had these like action moves that they introduced in the second one that they pulled through into the third one, where you can use triangle to do some stuff, and it worked really well in Kingdom Hearts 2. And in 3, they just took it to this like wild place that ended up just feeling like you had no agency over the game because you were just pressing triangle instead of literally anything else.
Yeah, there's no thought to it at all.
Yeah, and in this game, it's a lot of like, okay, let me actually look around. It's very hectic, it's very frantic, and hard to do it in the moment, but you need to take some time to like swing the right analog stick around to look at your environment and see what you can use to your advantage, whether it be literally the thing from Kingdom Hearts 3 where like there's like a pole that you can swing around on and like knock out a whole bunch of enemies, or something like you were talking about, like cutting the ropes on something so it drops down, or like jumping up onto a rafter so you can like jump down and do kind of like a dive attack, stuff like that. It's all really fun in the moment. Yeah, it does make me wish that this was like in Persona 5.
It's also paced well in that like the way it works, like in the normal Persona 5, you have like a deadline in this sort of like Stardew Valley calendar system to finish the palace by. But in this game, you just find the suit. Not that like that's very. I love that design for the game Persona 5, but in this game where there isn't like that deadline structure, you just find checkpoints in the palace that you can, for no consequence. And the game even says like there's no risk doing this. You can go back to the real world and regain all your health and like regroup, and then just go right back at no consequence. So like usually there's always a checkpoint after like a pretty meaty part of the palace, and where they incorporate the sort of bond structure where like in the core game you get to know these characters on like a really personal level, and you see their character's story play out, whether it's like the owner of the cafe or someone in your party, and leveling that relationship up will give you different mechanical abilities in the game. So like being closer with the cafe owner lets you like make coffee and curry that heals your allies, stuff like that. In this game, just kind of by playing it, you have a bond level that goes up, and you can use bond points to unlock really helpful passive abilities. So one is like your whole party has more health, one is the items are cheaper. God, the music, I mean, there's a lot of songs from Persona 5 here, and there are a lot of cool remixes as well, but some of the original songs are like my favorite. Like there's a new battle song that I really love, and the shop theme for Sophia's shop, which literally is the dark web, which I think is hilarious.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Like there's a story beat where you're like, oh man, the doctor and the airsoft shop are closed for the summer, and Sophia, your friend who's an AI, is I can help, I bought this off the dark web. And that's just like, okay, that's where we'll get our medicine and weapons and stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is very, once like I will admit, it takes like probably 90 minutes to like kind of get a flavor of like what this game is. I streamed my first like hour and a half playing it, and what I was really enjoying was just like this kind of applause break, seeing all these characters again for the summer, you know, being
so
back.
nice.
It was very nostalgic, yeah. But I was like, okay, how do I feel about the combat yet? And I didn't really know until like the first palace after the story. One quick note about the story, I won't get into it for spoilers, this will be spoiler free. The game is shown as a sequel to Persona 5. I'm not quite certain if it's a sequel to Persona 5 or Royal. That being said, it doesn't really specifically.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
That makes sense because Kasumi isn't there.
Yeah.
But it doesn't seem like there are a lot of big Persona 5 spoilers even in this story. So like my recommendation is like if you're a fan of 5 and you finish 5, this is a no-brainer. If you're a fan of 5 who hasn't finished 5 but you want to play Strikers but you want to finish 5 first, but you're like, that game is 100 hours, I kind of want to play Strikers right away. It seems like all you really need to know to enjoy the story of Strikers is like the full cast. So like if you know all the characters,
yeah.
It seems like the story of Strikers is pretty self-contained. It's much lighter. Like it's a similar vibe where you're like trying to stop these villains in the cognitive realm. It's a little bit different than the plot of 5, but it seems like a kind of a standalone movie based on the series, you know. So
Yeah.
I don't think you need to have finished all of 5 to enjoy the plot here. And the plot's fun. It's definitely not hitting the same highs, and you're not getting like the part of Persona 5 that like really I think makes people love the series, including myself, where like you get to know these characters as if they're real friends of yours, and like that's why even if it's just a corny scene in a cafe, you're like, oh my god, I'm in heaven. This is great.
Yeah.
Everyone's back in one place. But the writing's still really sharp. I think that the characters are true to themselves. Yusuke is like very extra in this game for some reason. Like,
Yeah, I've been really surprised
he has
by
had
that.
quite a
Yeah.
summer. Yeah. Like, he's a lot more understated in 5, and here he's like, I am hungry. You know, like, he's just not on the same level as anyone else.
Yeah.
Which I kind of love.
Actually, weirdly enough, I'm playing this game with the English voice cast on, which I have not been doing for my first tutorial. And specifically, I had to do that, which I was a little bit bummed out by, because, like, weirdly enough, you know, just, I don't know, 80 to 90 hours into Persona 5 Royal or something, like, I really feel like I've gotten to know all these characters via the Japanese voice cast.
Yeah.
In this game, you like really cannot do that if you don't understand the language, because there's a lot of like dialogue and callouts and stuff that are happening mid-combat.
Yeah.
That like just do not allow you to play this game in any language other than the one you like know and understand best. So I've been playing this game with the English voice cast on, and Yusuke's vibe in the English voice cast was like shocking to me, but also he feels like a completely different character at times.
That's
just,
interesting.
Just with the
Yeah.
way he's like enunciating and the amount of speaking and like proselytizing he's doing as a character is like on a completely different level. I love it. Don't get me wrong. I think it's incredible. But yeah, as you said, it's very clear that he's had like a wild couple months since the game ended. I do want to actually add to your last bit who this game is for. I think my one like big asterisk caveat for this game is like I don't think it's for people who are curious about Persona as a franchise, unfortunately. No. Because the game does like absolutely no work towards like teaching you how Persona as like a franchise works. It doesn't really do a whole lot to give you a really accurate, round understanding of these characters. You really need to have taken that from playing the first game, which is like a little bit of a bummer. There's one moment where I was like, oh, this is gonna be it, where they introduced the new character Sophia to everyone else, and I was like, oh, this is gonna be it. This is gonna be the like, if you haven't played Persona 5, here's where you get to learn who all these characters are, and like that was not the case at all. So unfortunately, this really is like an extra game for people who already liked the first one. What I will say though, and an interesting kind of like side avenue that I've taken that I've been really enjoying actually, because I didn't really remember a lot of the stuff that happened towards like the beginning of Persona 5. I went and started watching the anime, which is available currently on Funimation. You can watch the anime, which I have seen online and in some discussions that like people have very mixed feelings on it. I've been loving it, and weirdly enough, the anime also is not really a great starting point for people who have played none of Persona 5, because they don't do a whole lot to explain like how Persona 5 really works. And they also spend a lot of time focusing on the actual gameplay mechanics of Persona 5 in the anime.
I actually love that.
Which is like wild. Like there's a whole like side beat in one of the episodes where Joker wakes up in the room and they teach him how fusing personas works. And it's like, you don't need to spend 5 minutes on this. This is just make Arsene, the character from Smash Brothers that everybody knows, just make him like Ash's Pikachu. Just like keep him around the whole time and you're good. But instead, Arsene's like, goodbye, I'll meet you in another life. And then he gets his head chopped off and fused into like a little demon in a bowl. It's like very silly. It's like not necessary at all. But in terms of refreshing my memory and like kind of doing a little bit more of these characters, it's actually been a really like enriching watch to prepare me for Strikers. So I watched like 10 episodes of that, and now I'm like in Strikers. Strikers and like loving it.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was having a similar thought while playing Strikers, where I'm like, is this the game that I can pitch to like new fans? And it's definitely not.
It's really a bummer.
But at the same time, though, I've played a lot of Persona spin-offs. I played the dancing games. I played Q2 and like, they're actually all great if you're a big fan of the series. But I don't think they're a required rating by any stretch. But I do think if you're a fan of Persona 5, this is a must. Like, I think you will have such a good time with this game.
Yeah.
And again, the story is not hitting the same highs, but I think it's like a very worthy sequel already.
Yeah.
So I'm actually impressed with it.
Yeah, me too. I'm really excited to play more of it. I do want to mention, like, it's been my like long quest to have something Persona adjacent on the Switch. I've really wanted Persona 5 to get ported. Unfortunately, I don't think it's ever going to happen. What I ever get is Persona 4 Golden. Like, I still have my fingers crossed for the Switch.
Yeah, that seems more likely.
But that said, if you like are really hankering to play a Persona-esque thing on the Switch, definitely go pick up Tokyo Mirage Sessions, because that really is like Persona Light. It just feels so much like a Persona game with like slightly different mechanics, and I had a really good time with it. And it's also in the studio, so it just kind of like will scratch that itch. Not that that's gonna get you into Persona 5 Strikers, but if you're like listening to us talk about Persona 5 Strikers, and you're like, man, I really like something like that, but I only have a Switch, Tokyo Mirage Sessions is a good avenue to take.
I agree for the most part, especially if you have a Switch. But I think like while playing that game, that like the reason people like Persona is like good writing and good characters, which I don't think is at least for me, I didn't experience in that game. But I think you're right in just terms of like style and vibe and structure. I think you're absolutely correct, and it's kind of like an interesting spin on the SMT series. But if you do have all the systems and you want to get into Persona, Royal is still the best entry point, like for the actual series.
Yeah, and also, I guess while we're throwing it out there, it's worth adding a caveat there that if you have, I think, a PS4 or a PS5 and PlayStation Plus, Persona 5, like, standard is free in the PlayStation Plus collection. It's hard to say it, but I would really advise that you play Royal instead, because, like, if you really like Persona 5 in the free version, you're gonna be really bummed when you have to start from the beginning to experience the stuff in Royal.
Totally.
So.
Honestly, this might be a hot take. I think the best intro to Persona is Fire Emblem Three Houses. I think if you like that game,
yeah,
you will really
right.
love Persona. I think Fire Emblem Three Houses, well not, it's accessible and it's not, because they're throwing a lot of info at you that can be overwhelming, but the game can be played on a very easy difficulty, where you basically just like roll through the combat and you end up just having like this sort of like friend simulator, basically, where you're like learning about these characters. And I think that division of like, I'm getting to know these characters better, and it's like aiding the battles and it's making me care about the story, is like exactly how you're getting from a good Persona game.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I digress. Strikers, really good game. Highly recommend if you're a fan. And we'll maybe report on it again if like something about the experience changes further in, but I imagine it will stick the landing, given that it's also a shorter game. It's like 25 to 30 hours.
Yeah. Oh, I wanted to make a point of this also. You're playing it on the PS4 at the moment. I'm playing it on the Nintendo Switch. The big differences between the two, because I found it really hard to Google this for some reason, and now having played it on the Switch and you were playing it on the PS4 and I watched your stream of it, the PS4, 60 frames per second, load times are really fast. It looks obviously better than it does on Nintendo Switch. The Switch version is like way beyond passable and is actually like really good. It is the best performing Musou game I've seen on the Switch, like by far. So like if you're a person who played Age of Calamity and you were like, uh-oh, this is not running super well, I have found that Strikers runs like really well. It's like locked at 30 frames per second instead of 60, but looks great and plays great and looks exactly like Persona 5 just on your Nintendo Switch, and that is all I really asked for. I specifically got it on Switch because we were just talking about this during the break, but like I feel like I've been neglecting my Switch recently, like I haven't had a lot to play, so I got it specifically so I had something on my Switch, and I've been really liking it. So the Switch is back between this and Bravely Default 2 for me.
I think also, like, given how much the game is kind of visual novel-esque, the Switch is a great console for it. So, like, even if it's at the sacrifice of not quite as smooth battle animations, like, half the game is story. So, like, it's really like, which part of the game do you want to benefit from the system you're playing on? And
I know, look, let me preface this by saying I know this is not how game development works. I'm aware, but it really does make me feel like you could make some concessions visually and maybe find a way to get Persona 5 on the Switch. Like it really does feel like it's possible. I have to assume it's not for some reason or another, but this game looks so good on the Switch, and has real-time action combat, that like it makes me think that it would be possible to do it, but who knows.
Also, in the configuration menu, you can switch between graphics or frame rate if you want like to focus on one or the other. I think that's also on the Switch version. So like,
oh, is it?
If you, I don't know for sure.
I mean, that's very much a PS4 version. That's like very much a PS4 thing. Like PlayStation always does it. I can check right now. How about I check right now?
Yeah, why not?
Okay, so reporting back, no graphics or frame rate mode on the Switch, unfortunately. But I do want to mention the other thing about the Switch that is a little bit of a caveat is that the load times are really long, but I haven't really found that to like hamper my fun in any way. But if you're choosing between the two and you think you'll play it a lot on the PS4, like that's probably the best place to play it, I imagine.
Yeah.
But I just really wanted it on the Switch, and I'm finding it to be a perfectly enjoyable, if not great, experience. So yeah.
And hopefully buying it on Switch gives Atlas some data to be like, hey, psst, release more. I mean, it's not unthinkable because SMT is like a Switch exclusive. Like the new one is going to be a Switch exclusive. SMT has been on Nintendo since like Super Famicom.
Yeah.
The last 3DS game was Persona Q2 New Cinema Labyrinth.
Yeah.
So there's like a friendship there. Just gotta realize it.
Persona 5 Strikers is a good game. You can get on a bunch of platforms. We love it here in the Aether. 2021 has new video games, and we're playing them in the Aether.
I had a question for you. What do you think of the new characters? The two new characters they added?
I'm iffy on them at the moment.
Yeah, I was really unsettled by Sophia's introduction, but her like interaction with the ensemble synths has been really fun. She has like that sort of data quality of being like a AI.
Yes, which is like so
always funny.
My shit. I mean, I am the person whose favorite Marvel character is Vision and has been like since Age of Ultron, and then like went and read all the like comic stuff about Vision. So like I'm very much that dude, and also Data in Next Generation, as you just mentioned. Big fan of that like trope for a character. Where Sophia starts to like I think rub me the wrong way in terms of her writing is that she feels a little bit like Lilu from Fifth Element at times.
Yes, absolutely. That's what initially turned me off.
Yeah, in ways that I think are like detrimental to the storytelling for that character. But also, I want to play more of it and see if like maybe she rounds out a bit more and becomes a little bit more instrumental and has a little bit more agency. But that said, the character that they introduce as the antagonist for the first Palace is incredibly well designed and is so fun to watch on screen. Just like a real like a real like black hole of your attention. You really can't stop smiling while watching this person be evil. It's wild.
Yeah, it's sometimes so fun to see a villain that's like not even trying. You know, we talked about the ProZD video where he's like, the world isn't perfect, and it's like the game is thinking you don't know who the villain is, even though it's very obvious. Yeah. But when a character is like, I know I'm the villain, I'm gonna flaunt it every second I get on camera, it's just incredible.
Yeah, just like is really reveling in it. And I want to be clear that this is not like a Kamoshida kind of villain. This is like, Kamoshida is a person who is like doing really unspeakably horrible shit and is like very evil and loves being evil, but you also like really want to beat the shit out of him the whole time. This is a very different take on that, where it's a little less high stakes, I would say.
Yeah, it's like Ursula in Little Mermaid, who's just like, yes, I love evil. Yeah, it's more
absolutely.
like that.
That's a great take. Yeah.
The other new character is, it's kind of funny the way they introduce him. So he's this detective who knows Joker's leader, Phantom Thieves. The very beginning plot, this is not a spoiler, the very beginning plot is that there have been recent reports of like personality changes. So like everyone suspects this is the Phantom Thieves doing it, that they're back in some way, even though it's not, but more on that later. Yeah. So this detective is kind of after Joker, and he's set up in the beginning kind of in the shadows, and then he's just been, I'm like 5 or 6 hours in, and he's just been like formally introduced, but like he shows his badge and he's like, I'm a cop, and everyone is like, ew. Like, it's just so funny. Haru has a great line where she's like, we despise cops, actually, like with a smile on her face, which I'm like, hell yeah. But he has this kind of uneasy alliance with the group, and I think he's the one whose persona is Jean Valjean, or based on Jean Valjean, which like, we'll have to see how that manifests. He has more of a Javert vibe currently.
Yeah, I'm just excited for you in general to get any Les Mis content in there.
But yeah, I'm excited to see where the story goes, even though it's like a little bit lighter than 5 is.
Then there's a third character whose persona is adoring fan from Oblivion.
Pretty much. It's like one notch above, like, hello! Yeah. Exactly.
Hello, I'll be your persona today.
Exactly. But yeah, it's been really fun. I think, I'm not sure how he's going to round out the ensemble, and I'm hoping that Sophia's story continues to stray from like what we initially felt with her introduction.
Yeah.
Her scene where she orders stuff from the black market like kind of did a lot for me, but okay, like that's her energy, is like blissfully unaware of like the danger she's bringing to everyone.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll see how it plays out, because it could go either way, but it's just so fun to be back with these characters. It's fun to play as all of them. The design is exactly what you'd expect it to be.
Yeah.
It's just a great time.
And even just like the high level setting it in the summer, so there are like really no like school stakes. I think it's really smart.
Oh yeah, totally. Also, just real quick inside stuff. Haru's like kind of working for Monsanto now, which is so funny.
Yeah,
like
man.
her first line is like, "I'm genetically engineering seeds." It's like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Which I love. I mean, that's actually a needed occupation, but it's just funny because she's also like tremendously wealthy. Like she's like 1% rich.
Yeah.
Given her dad was like the head of a fast food chain. So I just thought that was a funny detail for us, given our connections to big agrochem.
You know us. Alright, okay. Should we wrap up?
Yeah, let's wrap up. This is a fun one. Hey, listener, thank you so much for listening. We appreciate you. We say it every week, and I feel like it always loses meaning, like rewatching the shirt over and over again, but I don't want it to, because we mean it every time. I mean, I think this year in particular has been weirdly a big year for us. We've seen a lot of numbers go up, and not that we're doing it for that reason. Like Brendan and I would make this show because we just enjoy doing it, but it's always it's just like unreal to see anyone else enjoying it as much as we enjoy making it. So thank you for those who've like told us that in recent weeks, that this show means a lot to you in some way. It really makes us feel like what we're doing here is worthwhile in like any way. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, every like week to 2 weeks, I'll have a moment where like I'll just be scrolling on Twitter or like doing anything else, like literally doing my job or something, and I'll like have a freeze frame moment where I'm like, holy shit, Into the Aether is really fun. I like making this podcast. So I do think in that vein, like, yes, Steven and I would be making the show regardless. These are just the conversations that he and I have generally anyway.
Yeah, right.
Just recorded and released. But that said, it's really fun, and it's really wonderful that people respond the way they do, and we're so grateful that anybody listens and shares it and whatever. So thank you all so much for listening. It's really, really wonderful.
Yeah, thank you so much. Again, worth repeating until the end of time. If you like the show, the best way to help it grow, as you know, is to share it with a friend who you think might also enjoy it. If you feel so compelled and you're like, I love Apple Corp, you can give us a review on Apple Podcasts. Some of you have done that recently. We've seen some new reviews. Thank you so much for your kind words. But honestly, just listening and sharing it is the best way to help us. We have a Patreon as well. Again, if backing the show at all puts you in financial strain, please do not. We will understand if you have to withdraw your funds, but it helps us grow. It helped me get a new capture card, which is going to help me do more streaming lately, stuff like that, new equipment that will help us do more outside of the show. Speaking of that, I'm going to be starting my Nuzlocke run of Pokemon Emerald, I think in like the coming weeks. So I still have to get a bunch of stuff set up, so it might, it's still a little bit up in the air, but I imagine everything will be like good to go at some point in March. So I will announce that. That's something I've been wanting to do for years. I don't even know if Nuzlocks are still popular, but I just want to do it. I think it'll be a really fun time. And I've been really enjoying streaming with you all anyway. Like I think I'll resume FF10 as well.
Those have been so fun, and I've been using them as a guide for me on my playthrough of Final Fantasy X, so I do hope you continue so I can continue using you as a guide.
I definitely will.
Shout out to my dad, by the way, who's playing Link's Awakening and is using my playthrough as a guide.
Oh my god,
that's fun.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So yeah, intothecast.online is where you can find all our links to our Twitch, to our YouTube. If you missed our streams, they're all backed up on YouTube as well, and there are some playthroughs that are YouTube specific. I know, Brendan, you've been doing Lost Odyssey and Earthbound just like straight to YouTube, recorded ahead of time.
Yeah, I don't think Earthbound is going to continue because I moved. I started playing that one handheld instead, but Lost Odyssey is definitely going to continue because I am loving that game every time I sit down to play it more. So stay tuned for that. I think we're 6 episodes in, and I've been keeping those shorter also. Those are like a half an hour each, just about.
Also for streaming, like, I mean, we're always open to feedback for the show as well, but for streaming, like, definitely let us know what you enjoy the most. At least for me, like, sometimes I'm kind of like up in the air of like, should I continue this? Should I do something new? It seems like FF10 has been a really enjoyable time, so I might like slowly but surely try to just do it, like go through the whole game. And I think, you know, the Nuzlocke thing I just think is going to be so much fun, and I will be a creative and heartbreaking journey. That's how they tend to go.
Yeah, I think that's going to be really exciting. Yeah, let us know how you feel about that. I also recommend just like in general. So first of all, you can go to intothecast.online to find the links to our Twitch and our YouTube. I recommend, like, I know how this sounds, but like hit the like notification bell on YouTube and whatever the equivalent of that is on Twitch as well, so you can like get notified when we go live, because we tend to just kind of like go live on a whim. We'll like tweet about it that day generally from either our personal Twitter accounts or the Aether Twitter account. But we sometimes we'll just do like surprise streams if we're like feeling kind of like motivated and I don't know, excited about something. I've done a couple on our Twitch where like I just hang out and like we'll just play something at random, just to, like hang out with people from like the Discord and whatever. Which, by the way, there's a Discord. You can also find the link to that on the Cast Online. Really wonderful Discord. It's a really great community. But anyway, I would just recommend like maybe getting the notification set up for that, because we go live a lot at random.
Yeah, it's at random pretty much. I think for the Nuzlocke, I might try to find like a day to commit to for that, so it's like a weekly thing or something.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
But everything else is just like whenever I feel like it, whatever.
Yeah,
okay?
Every once in a while we'll have like a kind of a spurt of like a schedule. So like when I was doing Link's Awakening and Hollow Knight, that was like every weekday morning at 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Eastern time was like when that was happening. Lost Odyssey has been just like, I try and release it as often as possible when life isn't getting in the way. But yeah, so just expect more Lost Odyssey stuff to show up on YouTube.
I think also I'll continue what I did last October for our Halloween season, where like every Friday I'll play a scary game. That was so much fun last year. I definitely want to do that again this time. And I might also continue, I made a Bloodborne character named Friday Blood, and I got like relatively far with him, so I think in October I might just continue the Bloodborne playthrough and then do a scary game every Friday. So that's like probably the closest you'll see to a schedule from us, 'cause we're busy boys.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what else we should mention here.
Bravely Default, a third, comes out in 2023
on the Nintendo Switch Advance.
Elvis's Choice. I think you're gonna really like it.
I guess that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. Anything you're looking forward to that's coming out on the horizon? Other than Pokemon, obviously.
I was gonna say Pokemon.
Monster Hunter comes out in later this month.
Oh my god, yeah, Monster Hunter's this month. Fuck.
Monster Hunter. And then April's some big ones for me. It's a little bit niche, but April we're gonna get the Nier Replicant remaster, which I'm very excited about. They just revealed the voice cast for that, and it's like unbelievable.
Yeah, it's really good.
It kind of, it's the star-studded cast, for lack of a better word. And also, Guilty Gear Strive, I think, comes out in March.
Oh
so
yeah, you've been really looking forward to that.
I have, yeah. So expect some rare fighting game content from me on that. I think the beta is available, but I, for the life of me, can't figure out how to play it on PS4, because the menu is like, did you want to buy it, or did you want to pre-order the deluxe? Like, I just wanted to play the beta, actually.
Yeah.
It's there, you just gotta dig for it, but, you know. I kind of would, it's close enough that I don't mind just waiting until it's out and seeing how it is.
Yeah. You and I are also in a place at the moment where we're playing a lot of stuff that we're not talking about on the show, because like, it's difficult to like not bring up that stuff, I think.
Yes.
But you and I have a bonus that we're working on for March that I'm like fucking pumped about, and the game that we're playing for that is like so good.
I'm also, if you don't mind, I'm gonna like have tease something a little bit further in the pipeline.
Yeah, please go for it.
Just to give some pepper in some fan theories, I guess. What if I just said like a random name? Like I just say Elvis at the end of every episode, people have to figure out what that means. No, but in terms of us playing a lot of games, there's something we're preparing for the beginning of next season that I think you're all gonna really enjoy, and that's all I'm gonna say.
Oh yeah. Is
that too much even?
No, I don't think so. That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah. Steven and AJ and I have been working on something for season 4 that it's cool, man. It's really cool. It's gonna be nice. It's gonna be a nice time.
I'm arrogant now. It's gonna be fucking good. It's gonna be a great episode. You're gonna love it.
Okay, I guess we should wrap up at this point.
That's it. I gotta get on my boat and meet other players to get some items.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh shit.
Oh shit, my boat.
Oh god, my boat.
Hey, my name is Brendan Bigley. You can find me on the internet at Brendan Bigley.
I'm Steven Hilger. You can find me at Steven Hilger. Have a wonderful, wonderful week. Happy early spring. It's March now.
Yeah, and it feels like it.
Pisces season.
Open those windows and get Claritin clear.
Get Claritin clear. Change of seasons making me sneezy. Oh no! Okay, goodbye.
Goodbye.
TWG, the worst garbage, the online.
Ready to go. Scene?
Each choice changes everything.
Hello and welcome to a very special bonus episode of Into the Aether. It's a low-key video game podcast, and mine, is Brendan Bigley.
I'm Stephen Hilger. I am so excited to be here, Brendan. This is an episode we've been looking forward to for a while. And I think in all the bonus episodes we've announced, it seems like it got like the most immediate like excitement from others.
Yeah, this is the first one that's like been like essentially requested by the listeners, which is fun. We've never really done that before.
I think there was one episode where like just offhandedly you or I were like, yeah, we're thinking about like, 'cause the bonus episodes have kind of become like a pedestal of sorts, which is kind of interesting. Like at first it was really like you and I remember back in 2019 talked for like a long time about, okay, because we have a Patreon now, like what are we doing more of? Like what does that look like for the show?
Yeah.
And we settled on this idea of doing a monthly bonus episode that's available for everyone. And just sort of like by default it became like an opportunity to really focus on one idea and like really dive deep on that. But it's also kind of become the thing I look forward to the most. It's like the thing that kind of almost rises above the rest for the month. You know, it's like has this pageantry to it that I don't think you or I intended at first, but it's sort of
Absolutely. My favorite, actually, looking back on all of them, one of my favorite ones that we've done was when we sat down to do an Animal Crossing bonus, and it turned into a Persona 5 Royal bonus.
Yes. It was literally, it was because you and I have also said that like it takes us maybe a half hour to 2 hours sometimes to like start actually recording.
Yeah.
But that was just like, okay, we're talking about Persona 5 so much, we should just do it. That's like, that just sort of squeezed its way onto the episode.
For context, dear listener, we just hit record 43 minutes into our Skype.
That's a lot of fun stuff.
Yeah, we've been having a good time over here. But what is this episode about, Steven? What are we talking about? What did the listeners request?
Yeah, okay. So this is something I'm so excited to explore with you. The listeners requested, and we offered and accepted to explore our favorite video game soundtracks. So what you and I have done, and this is something that we also like thought a lot about in terms of structure, because we were like, okay, do we treat it like a Game of the Year episode where we like write down 10 soundtracks and then we like try to make 5, and that just didn't feel right, because like, I mean, everything is subjective. Even when we do that for games, it's like kind of arbitrary at a certain point. It's fun, and it really makes us like really think about the year and choose the things to really celebrate. But I think with music especially, it's like even more subjective somehow, that like ranking anything even just for me felt like antithetical to the energy for this episode.
Yeah, I think that's a really great way of putting it. So I've actually been thinking a lot since we had that conversation, because you and I were like really back and forth on whether we should like rank anything at all. And I was pretty staunchly in like the no camp for music for some reason, and I was trying to like really land on why that was the case, why I'm so okay with doing it for GOTY and less okay with doing it for this. And I think kind of where I landed, and the reason I like ranking things in general is I think I like exploring what's important to me, and I don't know if it's very easy to do that without like sitting down and saying, here's all the things that I like, and if I try and put them in a definitive order, I'll learn more about myself and my own taste, and what I hold in terms of specific parameters of like a piece of media above other parameters, and I think that really serves to kind of like illustrate what kind of show you and I have whenever we get to do the GOTY stuff, because it is literally the amalgam of both of our tastes combined. Something about soundtracks and music in general, as you were just saying, feels so subjective that like I just don't think I would be capable of doing it. I have a very hard time. I've mentioned this on the show before, but I'm like an obsessive playlister on Spotify. I've had a Spotify account literally since the day they launched in the United States. I threw a party at my house.
Oh my god.
I was in a band at the time.
Thanks
and
for the invite.
I'm sorry, you. I don't think you were living anywhere near me at the time.
That's okay. That's good.
I was living with a band at the time, and we invited like other bands around us and other industry people we knew over to our house because we knew that Spotify was launching in the United States, and we like threw a party that was like at midnight. We're all going to sign up for Spotify accounts, which is very silly, but we sure did it. And I've had a Spotify account ever since. I've just been like a big fan of like that as a service and as a way to explore music and kind of like keep track of my own taste. And I have playlists for my top albums, my top songs, and then eventually boiling them down to top 10 albums and top 10 songs for every year since Spotify launched. I've been doing this like forever. And that's more for me for the same reasons I just described, like why you and I should rank video games for GOTY. That's like just a personal thing. Every once in a while I'll go on the internet and I'll like write up a post that's like, here are my top 10 whatevers, but usually I just keep them to myself because it's more of an exploration of my own like media diet and how I feel about this stuff. That said, doing it for something like this, like a wide breadth of soundtracks over the course of many, many years, just feels like too much for my brain to really handle. Like, I could sit down and do it, but I don't think it would be genuine. I don't think it would be an actual reflection of how I feel, because I'm sure I would change my mind, like, maybe tomorrow.
We could maybe do it if we said, like, the best soundtracks this year, you know? But
yes,
like,
yes. That's exactly what I mean, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, oh my god. That being said, I was wondering, like, okay, but how do we limit ourselves in some way to make sure it's not like, you know, I mean, not that we care about episode length. Look at that. Who cares? So basically, Brendan and I both, like, listen to a lot of video game soundtracks. More, I mean, I tend to already, but I made like a more concentrated effort to like revisit some stuff, and we brought to the table like, you know, we kept it between like a dozen and 20 or around there, which may sound like a lot, but I think like I just sort of made it to, okay, what are to me, and again extremely subjective, what are to me like the essentials and why, and something that I really valued in doing this is like, even more deeply than we usually do, really exploring music's relationship with each game individually. You know, it's like, okay, not just I like the music from this game, but like, what is it about the music in this game? What role does the music play in this game that is so effective to me? So, you know, I tried to really consider the music's relationship with the game on equal measure to like me just enjoying listening to it on Spotify.
Right, yeah.
Very funny, just quick story about me though, like while you were throwing the party for Spotify, or, you know, that Spotify was in the US, I was absolutely still ripping CDs into my iTunes, and the only reason I got Spotify was I left my iPod Touch on the train in New Jersey, and someone took it, and I was like, shit, well, I don't want to get a new iPod, so I downloaded Spotify to make my phone into an iPod-esque thing.
There you go.
And that's how I got in.
That's the story of how Steven became a fan of music.
Somehow me buying CDs in 2013 is still like a similar energy to how you and I play games sometimes too. I'm like, I walked to the retro store and I bought an N64 for $3,000. It's broken.
I mean, I will say that like the era of Spotify right when it launched in the United States was like me having it on my iPhone 4S and like, you know, 3G signal not being powerful enough to actually stream a song like reliably. That was like the era of like Google Maps would just completely shit out on you halfway through your journey and you would just be lost in the middle of nowhere. So, not exactly like the best streaming platform at the time, but you know, I sure was a fan for a while. Anyway, Spotify aside, I do think like although we just explained a lot about our process and our thought like going into the making of this episode, I do think it's going to be a rather loose conversation, which I'm kind of excited about.
Yeah, me too.
We're recording at night, which I always have to bring up. Like I think canonically I need to bring up whenever we're recording at night because it has like a very different vibe generally.
Skeletons come out.
Yeah, the skeletons are out, which is really fun. My skeleton came out. I'm actually just the flesh and organs.
Yeah, I'm just goop
in a pool
right
on the
now.
ground. Right, there are you know, evil beings laughing exactly like that all over the place. I like our night episodes because they're generally pretty chill, and I think this is going to be the most chill, which I think will be nice.
Yeah, man, absolutely. And I think what's cool too is like, I mean, I'm music plays a very big role in my life. I don't have a profoundly technical knowledge of it, so I'm not any kind of expert on speaking on like I can't go into detail on like the chord progression or the whatever. I don't even have the terminology to sound impressive. But again, my focus here was what is the relationship with the game? What does the soundtrack mean to me? And I've even kind of lumped my choices into 5 or 6 like very broad categories, which I'm hoping will kind of anchor the conversation. I think in talking about them, we'll end up talking about the games themselves as well. So we'll kind of touch on like a lot of titles here. Yeah.
Yeah. So do you want to start? Do you want to bring one to the table first?
Yeah, let's do it. Also, heads, I'm just gonna preemptively give AJ any bigger things than usual because I think that this episode may have some music samples in it, and I feel like it'll be a little harder to produce than a normal one. So just like, thank you preemptively.
Thank you so much.
AJ, give yourself a big round of applause, like in the audio here. It's like, yeah, and maybe even like a little theme song for yourself too. Be musical. This is a very musical episode. And yeah, I'll say it. It's a very jellical episode too. Whatever.
Imagine, oh man, missed opportunity for you and I to.
Fuck. Hey, there will eventually.
AJ, bleep that out. Actually, that's a great idea. We're gonna do that eventually.
Yeah,
season 5.
I think season 5. I think there will have to be a eventually.
When you and I are vaccinated, there's gonna be a into the Aether. Absolutely.
I've actually been daydreaming about if we can ever do live shows and what they will look like. They will not be low-key, man. Those would be wild. I'm gonna go all out for those. Okay, you want to start?
Yeah, you start.
Okay, cool. Oh my god, so many possibilities. I'm so torn between which category I want to start in. And again, these are not above or below the other. They're just sort of like anchoring points. I want to start with this one because this is actually, I think, the most plentiful category, and I think it's also the most synonymous with the spirit of this episode. This category I wrote here is when the soundtrack celebrates the game. That's my category qualifier here, which...
You would have the most, like, wholesome version of the Grammys.
The Hilgies.
Oh my god, okay.
There it is. I think all these categories I've made are pretty broad inherently, and I think they have a decent amount of overlap. I think you'll know what I mean as I list the ones that are in this category. But for me, the soundtracks who are in this category of celebrating the game are soundtracks that like feel like they know how cool or how fun the game is, and they're just like living it up. You know, it's like almost like they are the announcer for the game, and they're like, yeah, this rules, doesn't it? And I think what better way to start than the first game I have here under this category, which is Marvel vs. Capcom 2 New Age of Heroes.
Oh wow. I'm an employee of Marvel Entertainment. Anything I say and do does not reflect the views of my employer. Cool. All right, let's talk about Marvel vs. Capcom 2, a game that I'm not allowed to talk about at all.
I'm sorry. It'll be quick. It'll be mercifully quick. It was composed, the soundtrack, by Tetsuya Shibata and Mitsuhiko Takano. So the thing about this game that I find kind of miraculous is like this game came out, I think, well before. I mean, it's the sequel to Marvel vs. Capcom, so the idea of like these crossover fighting games was not new, but it wasn't like as everywhere as it is now. You know, this is before, I think this might have been like before or around the same time as the first Smash Brothers. So like this idea I think was kind of percolating at this time, and it could have potentially been like a very tonally mismatched thing. I mean, there's like the Capcom characters and the Marvel characters, like they're both big enough worlds that like you can have characters that kind of meet a similar energy. Like X-Men kind of feels like it would be in a Capcom game at some point.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you know, you've got like Jill from Resident Evil, you've got Captain Commando, literally Capcom, and then like Thanos. And it's like, so for me, the uniting force of this game is the soundtrack, which inexplicably is just like acid jazz, like the most like upbeat time that doesn't match either world's vibe. It's like, the vibe of this game is defined by the music itself. It's got the iconic character select song, the I Want to Take for a Ride, which you know, that one lyric made me write this category of celebrating the game. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, that's the vibe I'm getting.
Because I think so immediately you think it's going to be like almost the Doom MIDI electric guitar, you know, like
Right,
that
right.
it's just going to be like straight up like metal, but like, you know, filtered through like 80 layers of synths and then boiled down to the 5 tracks you can have on a Super Nintendo or whatever.
Right. I think it's just really fascinating that like this game could have been like a jumble of songs from Capcom games, you know?
yeah.
And yet they chose to have this completely original jazz soundtrack that just makes the whole game feel really upbeat and really tongue-in-cheek and very celebratory. I mean, that's something I love about fighting games is like how much pageantry and ego is involved there.
Yeah.
And I think that like when you're playing these games, they're so chaotic. I loved the third one as well, but the second one just has, I think, the better design and the better music. And, you know, there's just so many stages that like make you look forward to playing this game. Even if you're losing, you're just happy to be there. So that's why I had to choose this one.
Yeah. I want to hear what else is in this category for you.
Oh, I mean, there's a lot. There are a good amount of games. Do you want me to just to move on to the next?
Yeah, tell me the next one. Because I'm wondering if hearing more... Because it's just, dear listener, for your awareness, I did not categorize all of my games. I have one loose category and then everything else is just kind of floating around. I'm wondering if hearing more from this category will allow me to maybe take some stuff and throw it in your category as well.
Yeah, sure. So I'll give you another one that's very similar. I was really like torn between which fighting game I wanted to feature here because like there's so many iconic soundtracks from fighting games, and those are games that you're gonna return to like often. You know, so music I think plays a very kind of crucial role there.
Yeah.
So in a similar celebratory way, I also have Street Fighter 3 Third Strike, which was composed by Hideki Okugawa for very similar reasons to Marvel's Capcom 2. It replaced the acid jazz with like early 2000s alt hip hop, and it's like just one of the coolest soundtracks out there.
Really good.
Another iconic player select song. There's like a 3-minute rap about choosing your character in Street Fighter, and it's incredible. A lot of the songs were written by Canadian rapper named Infinite, and it is like a really amazing collaboration. And similar to Marvel's Capcom 2, design in that series, like my favorite Marvel's Capcom game, has kind of become its own thing at this point. Street Fighter 3 is like my favorite looking Street Fighter game. I love the early 2000s were very bizarre for a lot of things, but it was like the peak for a lot of really good fighting games. And like the design of this sort of like stylized 2D, I guess PS2 or Dreamcast era game, I just love it so much. And the characters they feature here were like, you know, they had Chun-Li and Ryu and Ken, and everyone else was new. So like, I think with fighting games now, there's a lot of reliance on nostalgia, and they'll be like, look who's back, and they're $20, you know, but with Third Strike, they just were like, fuck it. We're gonna throw in all these like very interesting new characters, and people love that. And I think when you talk to a lot of Street Fighter fans, Third Strike is like always, you know, in the top 3 for people. I really liked Street Fighter 4 as well as a game, but I never got into the art style, and I really didn't like how Street Fighter 5 looked either. And 2 is a classic, and the many dozens of versions of 2, but Third Strike just like is like my ideal fighting game vibe.
Wow,
and
that's
the
very
music
interesting.
does a lot for that. Yeah.
I don't know a whole lot about Street Fighter, but I do know that that's a hot take, I think.
Probably, but I mean, I think it's because I like the soundtrack so much. You know, that the vibe of that game is so wholly unique and so fun that I prefer it. So like, you know, there's a lot of iconic songs in Street Fighter 2, and that's like when you think of Street Fighter, I think a lot of people think of Street Fighter 2, and I understand why, but I think Third Strike takes it for me for the music.
Check it out now. Check it out, yo. Yo, check it out now. Third Strike, yo. Yo, I know you got your options, so pick the right thing. Some choices to make, and mad records to bring them. Just hooked on it. Dark bodies who want it. I don't know where you got your skills from, jump off it, bring it on. Any opponent or
Wow, that's great. Yeah, I think 2 is the one that I always hear about. I'm not a huge Street Fighter fan, so I don't really know. But
That's like my secret passion is fighting games. I like keep that hidden from even you.
I know, man. I'm still waiting for the episode where like we really talk about fighting games, and it seems like this is the closest we've ever gotten. And I'm just like, I just want to like scratch that itch a little more. But you know, I guess I'm gonna have to wait.
One day we'll find one.
We almost themed this whole season of the podcast around fighting games. You remember that?
Yeah, we almost did. But then we, you know, I'm not sure what changed. It just felt like a little bit. It didn't feel all encompassing.
You just want to keep secrets.
I like secrets. I'm sorry.
Tell me what's next on in this category.
Okay. So those I think were the 2 fighting games I chose. I think. Like of overall, which might be a hot take, I guess.
I have no fighting games, so you know.
The next one I have here, I think you all saw coming. It is Persona 5.
Yes.
This is when you think of soundtracks that are celebratory for the game, the battle song Last Surprise is like all about the heroes kicking ass, basically. And you hear that song hundreds of times in your 100 hours of playing Persona 5. I mean, I think I don't need to say really much about the role music plays in the Persona series. It is, if you don't even know the series or you never played it and you don't want to play it, you know and like the music. It's had that kind of, like, it's one of those game soundtracks that has almost risen above the game itself in popularity.
Yes.
I've talked to many people who are like, I don't know what the fuck Persona is, but I can't stop listening to Rivers in the Desert or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's another great song because that song plays in a very climactic moment against a character who you probably have been waiting to fight for a long time. Mm-hmm. And it's like, we're here, man. Like it just, like, the music matches the energy you have on your couch playing it, like, constantly.
Yeah.
Whether it's a more solemn moment, like Beneath the Mask, when you're in the cafe and you're just coming back from either a long day out in Tokyo or a long night in the other universe where you fight demons with your friends, with your suppressed ids that you've taken control over and now can fight with, kind of like Pokemon, but, you know, add some Buddhism and some Norse mythology in there and reinterpret it through kind of a suggestive art style. Yeah, I mean, I think Persona 5 is so... It's so defined by the soundtrack in many ways, and I think it kind of like speaks the game's intentions out loud and matches the energy of the player so directly, constantly.
There's been this like ongoing, I'm not going to say discussion online, it's almost like a meme online recently, that people will be like, oh yeah, this music sounds like it's from Persona, and then there will be somebody else who will like quote tweet that and be like, this person's never heard of jazz before. Like they think that jazz was invented by Persona. I very much reject that idea. Every time I see that kind of sentiment floating around, I'm always like, this is like a bummer, because I do think that Persona is doing something really different and something really special with their scores that is outside of just like, we just did jazz. Like it's not just them doing jazz. It's definitely way more than that. And I think, just to double down on your point, the way that it interacts with the narrative in really, really pivotal moments, or even moments that like seem trivial but are pivotal because of the music, like every battle you're in that Last Surprise plays in, I think is what makes those games really special. And that said, they've also explored a lot of genres in those soundtracks. Do you have any more Persona games on your list? Do you have all of them? Okay.
I only have 2 of them, actually, surprisingly. I had to fight myself to just there were a few series where I'm like, dude, do I just take every game? Or do I have to choose?
Yeah, well, I weirdly think Persona's maybe a good one to just have all of them, or at least the modern ones, 3, 4, and 5 on, because like they're all kind of exploring different things in really interesting ways.
I was gonna say that like Persona 5, even isolated, like it is kind of combining a lot of different genres of music.
Yeah.
It was composed by Shoji Meguro, who I believe has done 3 and 4 as well. And I remember seeing an article that was maybe an interview with some of the musicians. I don't know if it was with the composer himself, but I remember seeing someone state that with the Persona 5 soundtrack, their idea was to do one long song, like as if the entire soundtrack was one long song or like one long like jam session. And you can kind of hear that, especially in moments like there's a really cool song that is called Talk. That it's like the guitar hook that plays when you have cornered the enemy and they're like trying to compromise, and you're really talking to them, and it just sounds like what would play out Last Surprise on the album. You know, it's like what leads into the next song. So cool. But I think you're right. I mean, I think like all of them, you know, Persona 5 is a very jazz and rock centric soundtrack. 3 is all about hip hop and a little bit of jazz as well. And 4 is like just straight J-pop the whole time, which is great. See, I think in this category of celebrating Persona 5 is also like a very clear choice for me.
Yeah, I very much get that.
Been searching all along, facing while alone, without a clue, without a sign, without rest.
Okay, let me add one to your category then.
Yeah, sure.
Which I'm sure is on your list somewhere, but I'm gonna bring it up and put it in this category.
Oh, I like that. We can have conversations about that. Yeah.
Katamari Damacy, I think, is like so obviously in this category. And I actually did a lot of research on like the making of the scores for a lot of these games, just because I didn't really have a very good understanding, which is a thing I'll get into, but even as somebody who has made music for video games, like I didn't really know a lot of like what actually goes into it in like big budget titles, like a Persona 5, for example, or a Katamari Damacy, which I thought was really fascinating in this instance, because this is, you know, by various artists. In a lot of instances, but it's kind of arranged by a group of people. Specifically, one of the composers, Yumiaki, said that he spent a lot of time just looking for like J-pop singers who were like well known in Japan, but like hadn't really had a hit in a while. It was just like people whose names you would recognize, but like I don't know if it was like a cost thing or if it was just like we know that they can do great stuff, so like let's give them some great stuff to work with, even though they haven't like been in the spotlight for a while, which I think is like a really fascinating and just kind of like weird choice, which just kind of goes to highlight, I think, my favorite thing about reading up about the soundtrack to this game's creation, which is that they were given no direction at all. The director of the game gave them absolutely nothing. Was like, just make a cool soundtrack for the things that you're seeing on the screen, and I'm gonna say yes to literally anything you give me. Like, I want you to just like have complete creative control over what you're doing here, and don't worry about it at all. Like, don't ask me for permission to do anything, just do what you think is best. And this game's score feels like that. Like it complements the game in a way that I think you really only can if like a bunch of people who are at the top of their game are given complete freedom to do whatever they want in a way that isn't like horrifying, because I find a lot of instances it's horrifying when you're given complete creative control over something like that. You want some constraints,
Right.
you know, you want somebody giving you any kind of positive feedback loop, but in this case they just had none of that. They were just like, well, just run with it. And ended up making what I think is like one of the coolest video game soundtracks ever.
Absolutely.
Specifically talking about this category of like, it celebrates the game. It does that because it was literally like built from the ground up to do that with no compromises whatsoever. And I think that's really special. And in a lot of the reading I've done about the making of video game soundtracks, this is like a wholly unique way of doing it. Wait until, hey, dear listener, I'm going to talk about Super Mario Galaxy later. The exact opposite situation.
Oh no. Yeah, I mean, so you'll be happy to know that Katamari Damacy is not only on my list overall, but it is in this category, and it had to be.
Fuck yeah.
I mean,
yeah, it has to be.
the theme song, Katamari on the Rocks alone is like, you know, and I think the way you describe the making of this game's soundtrack, it feels like a concert. You know, it feels like they just put together, like, here are a bunch of bands we really like, and the game's sort of bizarre, arcadey structure, kind of like Little Prince, where you're just sort of jumping from planet to planet to place to place. Each song kind of defines the setting so strongly. And you feel like, I mean, literally after the end of every level, considering, or if your Katamari is big enough or if you hit the goal. Otherwise, the king shoots you with lasers. That's a whole other story. But if you meet the goal, it is a celebration. It's just like, hell yeah, you did it. And the music reinforces like a really positive energy in an otherwise extremely bizarre and potentially nightmarish game. You know, it's like there are people screaming and buildings getting rolled up in the Katamari, and then you'll hear like... I love that song, Lonely Rolling Star.
Yeah.
You hear this like, actually maybe AJ cut me singing and just play a little bit of that song. It's beautiful. But yeah, it's just so joyful. It's so good, and like you said, it is so varied. It's just, that whole game is like unrepressed creativity in all areas, which is great.
And it shouldn't work like literally at all. Like as you were just alluding to, I mean, the game's design, like remove the sound from it, is just like maximalist design. Like to its like most Webster's dictionary definition, you know, it is maximalism. And to have a soundtrack that complements that at all, and not only complements it, but maybe even tones down what's happening visually in a way that allows your brain to like parse what's going on. I think the score does a lot more to this game than I think people give it credit for. As much as people love the score, I don't think they realize how important it is to making any of this like even remotely fathomable as a person and a player holding a controller in their hands.
It's like the glue almost. It really holds the whole thing together. And yeah, I completely agree. I didn't know the story behind making the soundtrack, but that's amazing.
I just want to highlight the one song that I've loved ever since I was a kid.
Please.
Because I first read about this game in like a PlayStation magazine that my friend had like forever ago. And of all my friends, I was like the one who really wanted to get Katamari Damacy when it came to the West. And I picked it up immediately. It was like, I had to have this game.
Yeah.
And the song that I spent all of my time in, like, because they had like a sound player in the game. The one song that I always played was called The Moon and the Prince.
Oh, it's a great one. Yeah,
I love that song, and it's like the one that I still listen to constantly. I love that song so much.
Care package coming
Yeah.
I really love Que Sera Sera as well.
Yeah.
Like, I know you love me. I wanna hold you up. Yeah, whatever. My gateway into Katamari was like a demo. I had like one of those PlayStation discs that just had games on it.
Oh, yeah.
And it was like, here's what Namco's up to. And one of them was We Love Katamari. It was We Love Katamari. It wasn't even Katamari Damacy. It was the sequel. And at first I was terrified. I was like, what is this? Because it opens with you kind of ascending reality, and the king is like, hello, prince. And I was like, I'm like 11 and I don't know what's happening. But then as soon as it started and as soon as I heard the music, I was like, it was like a 180, like a light switch went off, and I was like, oh yeah, this is amazing.
Yeah.
I bought the game, and now I have the soundtrack on vinyl. Huge shout out to the vinyl. Because when you open,
awesome.
The disc fold is like Adam and God, that painting, but it's the prince and the king. It's so funny. It's so good.
Yeah, it's really great. Yeah, hey, that game's on the Nintendo Switch. Katamari Damacy Reroll. You can go pick it up.
Yeah, and it's a pretty good port too. I mean, it's just wherever you can get it, get that game.
Hit me with another one of yours.
Okay. I'm really glad we had the same one in the same category. I appreciate you tasking yourself with trying to figure out in which categories yours fall. It's a lot of fun to experience.
Yeah, I do think I have another one for this category, but
Cool.
just keep going.
My next one here is Splatoon 2.
Whoa,
Another game kind of similar to Katamari in that it was composed by a group of people, and also kind of similar to fighting games. It's sort of one of those games you're going to play it a lot via multiplayer, and every stage will have like its own vibe. But I think the music so heavily Shibuya-esque, Times Square-esque hub world where there's like a VH1 show that like announces what's going on in the game.
Yeah.
And like everything about Splatoon, which I think we talked about recently after the Nintendo Direct, everything about that game is like just sort of like giving off its coolest energy. You know, between the fashion and the customization you have of your characters, even the shooting itself is expressive in that you're covering an area with paint. Like everything about that game is kind of like overcome with like inviting you into this really cool place that's like so chaotic and fun. It is, as I've said before, the like summer energy to the chill of Animal Crossing's fall. You know, it's like, hell yeah, summer's here. Let's just get a bunch of paint on us and have a fun time.
Yeah.
And the soundtrack is also another really cool blend of genres. I mean, like, you've straight up got ska. I know I joke about ska a lot, but like, if I ever had to explain the appeal of ska, I can point to Splatoon 2. So like a lot of really upbeat music. It reminds me a lot too of the Japanese band Melt Banana, the like kind of really out there prog rock stuff. So you've got like some really cool experimental music, which I think is also great because I feel like Splatoon is also marketed to a younger audience as well, and like introducing kids to like really like. If you can get your kid into Melt Banana as soon as possible, they're gonna be the coolest kid ever.
Yeah.
So I think that is all really neat, and I think what's also great is that the Octo expansion, which was the DLC,
I was wondering if you were gonna bring this up. Yeah, I'm right there with you on this. Yeah.
Yeah, the DLC single player Octo expansion was like a totally different layer to that. It was like very lo-fi, kind of creepy almost. Which kind of, I mean, it was all about the sort of neglected octolings that are in the deep sea, where there are like GameCubes floating around, which is amazing. But yeah, this game's soundtrack is like so, it's like the heartbeat of the world, and it's so inviting, and it makes you want to get into different kinds of music. You know, it makes you want to blast Jeff Rosenstock and go on a road trip. I love it. It's great.
Yeah. Splatoon 2.
Splatoon 2.
Da-na-na-na-na-na.
The only thing I'll say is I wish that it didn't always. I love the song it plays when you have like a minute left, but I wish it didn't always play that one. You know, sometimes I want to hear what the stage's music is.
Hey, maybe Splatoon 3. Who knows?
I did write down my favorite tracks in case you're wondering: Undertow, Wet Floor, Muck Warfare, Off the Hook, and Fly Octo Fly. Wow, I just feel like I sound like everyone's dad suddenly. I just said that. Hey, kids!
Loved those names. I think those are great song names.
Hey, have you heard that Fly Octo Fly? It's pretty groovy. If
What
you
was the
ask your
first one?
dad.
Say the first one again.
Undertow, and then in parentheses, Wet Floor.
Dude, great song name. That's like maybe one of my favorite all-time song names now.
It's a good song.
Undertow Wet Floor? Holy shit.
Muck Warfare, Off the Hook, and Fly Octo Fly, which
These
is
all
the
sound
boss
like bands
fight.
I would see at Terminal 5 when I was in high school. Holy
Yes, exactly. It just makes you feel cool. It's a great soundtrack.
shit. Yeah.
This is Splatoon 2. I have, I think, one more in this category.
Okay. Do you want me to go first and then you close it out?
Yeah. I want to hear more from you. Yeah, let's do it.
The other one that I think I would add to this, and this is not the last time you'll be hearing from this artist, on my list at least, but a recent game that I think as time has gone on, the score has outshone the game itself in a lot of ways because it's so successful at what it's doing. Chipsel's soundtrack for Dicey Dungeons, I think, is like a straight up one of the best soundtracks I've heard in a game in a long time. It is wild, especially if you know Chipsel's like backstory as a producer. She's just this like incredible chiptune artist and has been for a very long time. Again, I'm alluding to the fact that I'll be bringing up her work later. But her work in this game specifically is like, what if I did all the stuff that I know how to do, but added this like 1960s game show flair and a live saxophone to like actual chiptune synths, and it works on a level that like that's an idea that it must have taken eons to actually sort out, because I've run into ideas like that before where it's like you think you've nailed something, or you think you've touched on an idea that's like so out of the box that like you gotta try it, and when it happens it's gonna click and it's gonna be perfect. It's like, oh my god, I invented a new sound, I can't believe it.
Yeah.
But the reality of doing something like that is that it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of time and effort to actually get those sounds to become cohesive in any way, shape, or form. And the idea of a jazz, of a saxophone alongside like chiptune synths, like a lot of square waves, weirdly does make more sense when you like actually like know how synths are built and stuff and know what waveforms look like. It does make a lot of sense, but still must have taken a lot of work to nail. It reminds me a lot of the interviews I've seen with Kevin Shields, who is the lead guitarist of My Bloody Valentine, and like what it was like to actually come up with the sound of that band, and like essentially like not invent that genre, but like define it. And you know, the guy has lost his hearing essentially because of the work that he put into like defining that sound. And that's the level of success I think that Chipzel has found with what she did on Dicey Dungeon. I think it's just an unbelievable soundtrack that I do think celebrates the game and the tone and the lore of the game, but maybe does such a good job that I just find myself listening to the soundtrack and I'm not really inclined to play the game anymore.
I also have Dicey Dungeons on my list. I do have it in a different category. Maybe that can play us in to the next one once we're done.
Fun.
But yeah, this soundtrack, because I really wanted to make sure, like, okay, is this because it's like one of the things I'm listening to more recently? I've also been listening to a lot of different soundtracks more recently, but I agree, man. This soundtrack is really on a completely other level to a lot of stuff, especially chiptune stuff. You know, because like combining, there are a couple soundtracks on here that combine, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, real instruments with chiptune, which I don't want to come off shitty by saying that, but you know, like you have a saxophone alongside synths. And like that's hard to pull off, and I think you're so right that it succeeds at a level that must have taken a lot of trial and error. The song I want to call out here is "Swing Me Another Six" is just like unbelievable. That's like gonna be one of my top played songs of this year, I think.
Yeah.
And yeah, just unbelievable soundtrack, Dicey Dungeons, and also a great game. But I agree, the soundtrack is like just always gonna be playing for me.
It's really good, man. Oh.
It's so good that I have nothing cool to say. I'm like, yeah, it just fucking rules. I don't know, whatever.
It's sick.
It's gonna be some of these. Like I don't know, it just fucking owns.
Yeah.
The last game I have in this category, and also feel free if you feel like there are games in your list that still fit this category, I want to hear about them. Do you have any before I give my last one?
I don't think so. That was the other one that really popped out to me.
Gotcha. My last one is Super Mario Odyssey, composed by Naoto Kubo. I mean, this is pretty on the nose. There are like 2 musical numbers in this game that celebrate like Mario as a series.
Yeah.
I was really hard pressed to find which Mario games I was gonna single out, because like pretty much every like first party Nintendo series has like incredible music alongside it. And this is where I think when choosing which Mario soundtracks I wanted to highlight, I started to really think about what is the relationship this music has with the game. You know, we talked about Mario 3D World recently and how that game is like a series of like quick hit lessons in design, just like kind of laser focus on one thing, you're in, you're out. And the music, I think, has to kind of complement the level design there. Whereas the level design in Odyssey is really about exploring the world. There's a range of genre in Odyssey's soundtrack that is not present in other Mario games that really impressed me.
Yeah.
I think Galaxy set the standard of like having an arranged orchestra for Mario games, and Odyssey like was like, hold my beer, let's one up this, you know, and just did so many different genres. You've got the horns and the fun like kind of rhythm of the lake level. You've got some clever remixes of old songs. New Donk City is a standout just by being like so majestic, and so like that level will make you cry and make you feel like you probably love Mario as a series more than you maybe do. But you get so swept up in it. There's like literally a band. I mean, it is as celebratory as you can get. And for me, one of my favorite songs in the game, which is like so atypical from any Mario song or any Nintendo song other than maybe Splatoon, the finale that I often bring up when it's just the perfect, like, of course this is gonna happen moment. The whole game, Mario's throwing his hat on enemies and possessing them and using the enemy's ability to progress. He kind of needs his enemies to go forward in that game. And everyone who's important is like purposely wearing a hat around Mario to prevent being possessed, which is a whole other conversation. But at the very, very end, you defeat Bowser. He's left hatless, and you need to get out, and you need to save Peach. And you have to take over Bowser to do that. You need Bowser to save the day.
Yeah.
And the song that plays is like a Letters to Cleo-esque pop rock number that is so fun and so silly and so just like it totally caught me off guard in a good way that I was like so into that finale. And it's structured in a way where it's this like very upbeat pop rock song, and then the hook is the Bowser theme song, which I thought was just so clever and such a fun way to like take these established melodies from old games and just throw them in when you least expect it. I thought it was really cool. Another cool thing about this song, which is "Break Free, Lead the Way," they localized it in a way that in English, the lyrics that are sung are from Peach's perspective. And in Japanese, it's from Mario's, and they're actually singing a duet. So like,
Whoa.
the lyrics are from like in English. There's a line where it's like, "Kick off the wall, a miracle in 3 dimensions." Like it should be so cringy, but it just works so well for me, and I love that song. I actually do prefer it in Japanese. I'll say I really like the singer's voice. She's got like a really cool edge to her voice.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really think that this soundtrack like kind of helps separate Odyssey in a lot of ways. Not to say that it's the best, but I just think that it is really like proud of itself and proud of the series, and is like adding almost a heightened importance to these characters that mean nothing, basically. You know, like, I mean, not to discredit Mario's legacy, but like I've never cared about Bowser's role in the story until like the game was like, you know what, like. It's not that Mario or Peach need Bowser as a figure in their life, but the game needs Bowser, and we're gonna celebrate all the set pieces here to this like Veruca Salt 90s rock song.
感情のブロックを壊した臆病はなもうそこに消えていた無理だと決めつける奴らしい何
So good. I love the variety. I love the majesty. The pageantry is the word I keep coming back to. Incredible soundtrack, Mario Odyssey.
I can't add anything to that. I do. I am wondering though. Do you have Galaxy on your list at all?
I don't actually. I do have one more Mario game, but I don't have Galaxy.
If you don't have Galaxy, then maybe now is a good time to bring it up, because I was wondering if it would fit into this category, but also I think a lot of the stuff that you're touching on, I think Galaxy nailed also.
Yeah, totally.
And one of the things that makes Galaxy stand out, and the thing that everybody kind of knows about it, is that it's like the first orchestrated soundtrack that they did for a Mario game. It's the Tokyo Symphony Orchestra, like made that thing happen. But I went in and I was reading about the development of the Super Mario Galaxy score. Do you know anything about this?
Not at all. No, tell me.
It's a fucking nightmare. It was a fucking nightmare to make this score. It's amazing that it worked at the end. So the composer of the soundtrack is by a person named Mahito Yokota, and there's a person named Koji Kondo who is like the sound supervisor and director for like Mario, like as a whole.
Yeah, and Zelda too. He does a lot of work.
Like just big Nintendo figure essentially.
Yeah.
But Yokota was the person who was like making the soundtrack, who was like tasked to make the soundtrack. Koji Kondo was like doing all the other stuff, was like, what sounds come out of the Wiimote? You know, like that was like that was essentially his vibe. But he also like was the person who was overseeing everything and like was technically Yokota's boss. Like that was just to like I guess set the stage for what happens here. So essentially the first direction that Yokota is given is like, you've heard Mario soundtracks before. They have like a lot of like marimba. There's like some kind of like Latin American inspired instrumentation happening in there, and like just play with that. And starts doing it and makes an entire score, 28 tracks of a soundtrack for Super Mario Galaxy that is just inspired by like previous stuff that you've heard in other Mario games, and hands it into Koji Kondo, who just says, "This is not good," to him, just straight up. And he's like, how am I supposed to respond to this? Like, I just like busted my ass making like a whole ass score for this game, and was just like told no. And then like had to go and take some time and then go back and be like, please, like hat in hand, like, please just tell me like what's wrong with this. I can't believe this. I'm gonna quote an article about this. Quote, when asked why his music was rejected, Kondo responded, "If somewhere in your mind you have an image that Mario is cute, please get rid of it." Incensed by the rejection, Yokota almost resigned from the job, but Kondo implied that Mario's character was, quote, cool, and instructed him to try again from the beginning.
I can't, Brendan, can I share something personal that is literally that exact story in some ways?
Okay, sure.
When I was 2 years old, I hated when anyone ever called me cute. I was furious, and I always replied, "I'm not cute. I'm cool."
Oh
And that's
my god, you're Mario.
literally exactly what is said there. That is a phrase that my parents and my older sister still use against me. They're like, no, I'm not cute. I'm cool.
Oh my god.
And I just remember like some family friend went up to me, 2 years old. I'm like basically a baby that can walk, and she's like, "Oh, he's so cute." And then I corrected her, and she was like, "Oh, okay, he's so cool." I can't believe that was used against the composer, and that was literally me at 2 years old.
Oh my god. I can't
Wow.
believe you're Mario. That really does explain a lot. Wow.
I ask AJ at every episode, like, do I sound cute in this recording? Because I don't. Get that out of your mind right now. I'm
I
cool.
sound cool.
Yeah.
So essentially, Yokota then came back and was like, well, first he just kind of bailed and was like, I'm gonna quit because this sucks.
Yeah, rightfully so, yeah.
And then eventually came back and was like, I'm gonna finish this out, and created 3 versions of a soundtrack. One of them was orchestral, one of them was like pop music adjacent, and the other one was kind of like a blend of the two, which I'm very interested in hearing, but like doesn't exist. And when presented to Miyamoto, he ended up picking the orchestral stuff. But it is worth noting that Miyamoto also thought that it was just like temp music that they had like pulled from like a music library, and that it wasn't actually gonna be the soundtrack. And it was like, I like
my
this
God.
vibe. You should make something like this. And he was like, no, I did make this.
This is it.
Which is just like
my God.
another more subtle thing.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think that for all of that backstory, I think the Super Mario Galaxy soundtrack, like it was the first time in a long time, and maybe it was because I hadn't had it like a Nintendo console ever in my life until the Wii. But the soundtrack was the thing that made me a fan of Mario in a real way.
Oh, yeah.
I had played all of the Mario games like up through this one, whether like through emulators or on like my Game Boy and Game Boy Advance, or like at friends' houses. I played Super Mario 64 and Sunshine, but Galaxy was the one that like really hooked me, and a lot of it weirdly was, I don't know how I was so tapped into it at that age and at that time, but a lot of it was because I knew it was the first orchestral soundtrack, and like that was a cool big deal. And I was so, I mean, I've been a musically inclined person for pretty much my whole life. But that was the thing that drew me to wanting to play Mario Galaxy, and that's what made me a fan of Mario in like a real way.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's an incredible soundtrack, and I think when we talked about 3D All-Stars last fall, or last summer even, the takeaway from playing 64 and Sunshine and Galaxy all have great soundtracks, but Galaxies comes together in a way that I think the others two are different.
Yes.
You know, the design of Galaxy, where like you're running through space, also kind of a little Prince vibe. It matches so well with like a sweeping orchestra. Whereas like Sunshine, the music works perfectly for the vibe of that game. And 64, maybe more on that later, also matches that game's vibe very well. But I think like when you're talking about celebration, Galaxy for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's a very special soundtrack. And honestly, like when I'm looking at the scope of soundtracks, and I think of like, you know, transmedia, not just video games, but when I think of like film scores, you know, the ones that are the most memorable are the ones that like, you know, everybody touches on all the time or like hums constantly, you know, like everybody, as soon as they touch a piano for the first time, plays the Jaws theme, you know, on the lowest notes they can possibly find on the piano, stuff like that.
You don't play clocks?
I play clocks, yeah, I play clocks.
I'm sorry.
I didn't bring this up during any of our mention of Clocks or Coldplay. Clocks is actually my least favorite Coldplay song. It's, as a fan of Coldplay, it's a song I can't stand.
Whenever you're a fan of a band, no fan is ever like, yeah, I love the hit. Like if I went into a group of Modest Mouse fans and I was like, you know what, it's Float On or nothing, if you ask me, they would beat me up.
Yeah. Anyway,
So, yeah.
I do think that the Super Mario Galaxy soundtrack has like kind of hits in that way. Like I think
Totally.
there are motifs in some of those songs that if you played them, people would immediately like be like, oh yeah, that's Super Mario Galaxy. And I think that that's just the testament of a good score. You know, there are a lot of other ones that we're going to talk about, I think, during the course of this episode that are like, you know, more ambient or more just like kind of, you know, a watercolor brush on the background of the thing that you're doing. but Mario Galaxy's score like really wants you to know it's there, and does a wonderful job of like being as charismatic as Mario himself, the cool guy on space.
Yeah, I totally agree. And again, I think these categories will bleed into each other, but I can't think of a better game to end this category with than Odyssey and Odyssey and Galaxy.
Yes.
I almost said 3D World, which was also up for consideration. That game's got an incredible soundtrack.
Of all the things I like about that game, the soundtrack is not one of them. I think.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think it's good. It's just like it's not the thing that I think about when I play that game.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I didn't choose it over the others, but it's still good. Like all the Mario games have good music.
Yeah. It's
Okay.
true.
You want to take a quick break? Hey, AJ, play us out, and we'll be back with more music.
Goodbye.
Brendan, we're back, and like I alluded to earlier, Dicey Dungeons was on my list, but in a different category. So if you don't mind, I might lead us into the next category I have here. It's a little bit smaller, but I
Chiptune
think it's
soundtracks
interesting.
with saxophones in it.
That's it, and it's literally just Dicey Dungeons. You did it. The next category I have here, I think I have 6 overall. I don't know. We'll find out together. But the next one I named When the Soundtrack Keeps You Going. So for me, this is when music plays a supportive role in a game that might be demanding. It might be, a roguelike like Dicey Dungeons, where you're going to be making a lot of attempts over and over again. And the soundtrack is the thing that's kind of rooting you on unconsciously. So, it's something that if the game is like this oppressive Dark Souls-esque experience, the music is like, this sort of like gentle pat on the back. It's like, give it another shot.
It really sounds like we're about to argue our 2018 Game of the Year all over again, huh?
Yep.
Celeste is on there, and I'm just gonna put Hollow Knight in there also.
Oh yeah, you should. And you're absolutely right. So Dicey Dungeons was here, and Celeste, composed by Lena Raine, is absolutely on here.
Yeah. What a great score.
Just such an incredible soundtrack. Also chiptune, and also just like so. I mean, Lena Raine does incredible work. I think she just did the Sackboy game that came out, and like,
oh cool.
Every review I've read has been like, this soundtrack is like so incredible. Like everything she composes is great. And what I really love about Celeste, amongst everything else I've said about that game, which is a lot of positive stuff, we mentioned recently the idea of like authorship in games. I think with a game like Celeste, when you have like a really talented small team, you see the creative voices on display kind of like you would hear them in a trio. Like I've always loved listening to trios because like you can really feel everything kind of harmonizing. With Celeste, you've got like this incredible game design and writing. The first track of the first level, First Steps, is like one of my favorite like level 1 songs, and that song is so important because the game starts off pretty hard already. So like, there's a chance you might pick it up and bounce in level 1 because it's so difficult. But the music of that stage is like so whimsical and positive and so like exciting that you kind of just want to keep going for the song alone. At least that's how I felt. I felt like I'm like, oh my god, okay, I gotta really think about when I dash. Do I go for that strawberry? I don't know. I keep dying, but like I was so, because of everything, because of the art and everything, but the music kept me going. And then fast forward a year when I'm doing the B-side on stream for the Haunted Hotel, and like a ghost is chasing me. It's just so exciting, and like the rhythm of it is so captivating that like it's just a flurry of death, and that game's ability to let you start over right away is so important, and it's so aided by the music. That tenacity is so encouraged by that game's soundtrack, which can get like creepy at some points. Like it's not always positive like First Steps, but it's always like invigorating, and it's always the thing that like makes sticking around in one part of one level for hours as you die over and over again a positive experience. So I mean, I love the soundtrack just like on its own, listening to it on, Spotify or whatever, but its relationship to the game I think is crucial. It is the thing that is rooting for you above all else. Also to see Madeline's story, I mean, that's another reason why I was so compelled to beat that game, but I'm doing the B-sides now. The story is basically over. I know there's like a secret final chapter that I've been meaning to get to for forever, but the B-sides are just for your own, bragging rights, basically. And brilliantly, there are remixes on the B-sides that are like also really cool. Just an incredible score from start to finish. Hey, you know I love Celeste, and here's another reason that I love it.
Yeah, that soundtrack is really, really good. Even though I have never finished that game, I'm like right at the end. I should really just do it. But even though I've never finished the game, I do listen to the soundtrack a lot. It's really good.
Yeah.
Big fan.
So tell me about this game, Hollow Knight.
Hollow Knight's a wonderful video game that I played on the Nintendo Switch, and recently again on my Xbox Series S via
That's
Game
right.
Pass. You can watch the whole playthrough on our YouTube channel. Still can't believe I did that. That was wild. That was a wild
That was
thing.
amazing. Yeah, you like breezed through it.
Yeah, weird. Anyway, that almost like copy paste a lot of the stuff you just said about Celeste and put it in Hollow Knight, but weirdly enough, like the score is just like sadder. It's just like a sadder, more ambient score that kind of achieves the same thing. But I think more specifically, the thing that I want to copy paste from your discussion, or from your pitch there for Celeste is like everyone is just like a creative force firing on all cylinders. You know, it's a small team. Team Cherry is 2 people. They outsourced like I think a little bit of the art to a 3rd and 4th person, and then the score was all done by 1 person, Christopher Larkin, who got it in 1. Man, nailed it. Great. So like it kind of does double duty, I think, which I think is really important. Whereas I agree, Celeste kind of has this kind of like constant, almost like pulsating like a pull towards the player to kind of like get them from point A to point B. Hollow Knight's soundtrack kind of has to do a couple things simultaneously, and I think it does a really good job of all of them. And first and foremost, what it needs to do is build a world, right? It's like it is kind of create the sound design and the environment that will allow you to believe that the place Hollow Nest can actually exist. And I think it does a really wonderful job of that. In the moments when it needs to be quiet, it's quiet. In the moments when it needs to be loud and brash and terrifying, it can be that as well. But the point where it really almost becomes one-to-one with Celeste are in the boss fights, which all of the boss fights just have like wildly intricate and fascinating scores. The one that really comes to mind just while I'm thinking about it is the Collector. Just the fighting the Collector, who is like easily the most horrifying boss fight in the whole game. He's this like weird shadow figure who hides up in this tall tower and takes all of the bugs in Hollow Nest and like shoves them in glass jars and ends up using them as weapons against you. Just like throws these glass jars at you and like really wants to capture you. Scary boss, and the score that goes along with that is really fun and really aids that just like that fear. I think it's wonderful. It has like early 2000s like claymation like scary vibes to it, and the soundtrack really aids that. Hollow Knight's score contains multitudes, and I have it on vinyl, and it's behind me right now. I don't. Maybe Steven can see it. It's dark behind me, but it's wonderful. I listen to it a lot. I think it's really great.
I think it's also a good point in terms of this category of music that keeps you going, and that it doesn't have to be inherently positive. You know, I think the journey of Hollow Knight is so isolated that the company you have really is the music, and it's going to match the mood, like you said brilliantly. It's going to match the excitement of the battles or just the like sadness of being alone, but it is there, and it is like aiding your time there and kind of making the world fully realized in a way that it wouldn't be without it.
Yeah, the thing about the boss music in Hollow Knight is that while it can also ratchet up the tension in those boss fights, it also serves as your like celebratory kind of like fuck you when you win. You know, the moment when you win is when you notice the soundtrack the most, I think, because when it like fades out and like a little like Success jingle plays, it's like hell yeah, that song was awesome. I'm so glad that was playing while I was fighting. But for the entire time before that, you were tuning it out, not realizing that it was impacting the way you were playing, which I think is very interesting. one of the things I didn't mention about the Super Mario Galaxy soundtrack, which I thought was really fascinating, and it doesn't make a lot of sense to me, and I don't know if it's actually true or not. But one of the reasons they were almost against going with an orchestrated soundtrack originally was that they thought that using live instruments would subconsciously cause the player to try and play the game in tempo with whatever song was playing.
Interesting.
And they almost turned down the orchestrated soundtrack because of that, which I personally think is nonsense, because I think having like a kind of like driving synth would probably do that way more, I think.
Right. Yeah.
But I don't know. I just thought that was an interesting bit, and I just want to bring it up.
Yeah, I mean, I never knew there was so much resistance to what is like one of the most iconic soundtracks
Isn't that unbelievable?
in Mario history. Yeah, that's really wild. I'm glad he stuck with it, for sure. So, moving on, if you don't mind.
Please.
I've got 2 more games in this category, shorter, because Dicey Dungeons we already covered. One I know for a fact
So
will
are
be
we
on your
waiting
list,
for them
and
to come
one
there?
I think
Is
is a
what's happening?
50-50 shot. I'm gonna do the 50-50 one first.
Cool.
I think we'll be on the same level for the last one. The 50-50 one is FTL, Faster Than Light, composed by Ben Prunty.
So close to being on my list and didn't make it.
Yeah, I figured it was 50-50. FTL, also roguelike. I mean, I think this is sort of my roguelike category now that I'm looking at it. Kind of. FTL is a game where you are navigating space, and all the dialogue you're getting about the situation, it's very tabletop-y, in that, like, you are controlling a few characters in a spaceship, jumping from point to point, kind of like a point on the map in Slay the Spire, or a point on the map in Dicey Dungeons. And every time you go to a new point, there's like a narrated text box that says like, "Oop, there's a supernova," or like, "Whoops, this is the snail part of the galaxy." They can read your mind. And it's a pretty brutal game. Like, the game kind of
Yeah.
warns you straight up, like,
Hey, I'm
play the
gonna go
tutorial.
tease
I know all
people,
games have it,
'cause
but
I'm
you really
bored
got to
shit.
do it for this one.
I love you.
And
Good
2,
luck.
just know that you're not going to win ever. Like, the game kind of tells you that directly.
Yeah.
But the soundtrack, it's also worth noting the game's art style is very minimalist. It's very like 90s computer game. You know, almost like maybe like late 80s. I think it's cool.
It would be the best game on addictinggames.com. That's how I describe the art style.
Perfect. Yeah, because Into the Breach is more like 90s StarCraft energy.
Yeah.
But FTL is, like you said, it's even more minimalist. So really, like, the game is kind of like you're just up against like harsh probability. But what aids the experience so much, and what keeps you playing, or kept me playing, is the music. And it goes in broad, there's a broad spectrum of vibe here, because you have on one hand just like the majesty of space exploration, like the music that tends to play when you're just like checking your ship and you're in a peaceful part of the galaxy and you're just like looking at what you can upgrade. It's so like cool, and you feel so like at ease and so calm. And then there's music that plays. One of my favorite tracks that I wrote down is Cosmos Battle. There are variants on each song for battling and for exploring, so you always know when a battle is going to start, because it starts to slightly change suddenly.
Yeah.
And the Cosmos Battle song is like one of the more upbeat battle songs. A lot of them feel like, oh, you're gonna lose. This song feels like I'm gonna lose. But the Cosmos one, it's upbeat in a way that makes you feel like you have a little bit of hope. So this is an interesting pick, because the category is what keeps you going, and a lot of these songs are scary or unnerving, but they are also like your biggest clue into what is happening in this uncharted universe. They are the thing that is like the most appealing for the player to experience when you go back and back and back to this game. You know, you might love it for the tabletop vibe. You might love it for just like the role-playing element of like naming your space crew and the roguelike-y nature of it and losing a ship and getting a new one. But the music is like really... oh wow, yeah.
Wait, I actually, well, with the exception of one, but we'll get to it because it's on your list too, I'm sure.
And Dicey Dungeons, I guess.
Oh yeah, Dicey Dungeons counts. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
The reason being, Dicey Dungeons is actually a really good example, or I guess a good outlier. It's the exception that proves the rule in this case. In most roguelikes, eventually they become my podcast games when I get so far into them, and I will just mute the game entirely and just listen to podcasts, which like just really goes to highlight how wonderful Dicey Dungeons is. That it's become the exact opposite, where I don't play the game anymore. I just listen to this. I muted the game and I listened to the soundtrack. But
That's
anyway,
very fun.
yeah,
That's a good
yeah,
point.
so
That's a
yeah.
really
I
good
guess
point
not.
because like Binding of Isaac is the game that you played like for all podcasts and you don't really listen to the music.
I don't listen to music at all. Yeah.
Yeah,
I do. I know the music very well, in and out. It's like a piece of me because I've heard it so much. But also, it's not like the thing that I think of with that game specifically. But FTL was very close to being on my list because I really appreciate that soundtrack. When I was going back and revisiting stuff and like just kind of like going through the history of all the games that I've played, and the ones that inspired me a lot while I was like trying to make music for video games as well. FTL was a really big one for me.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
This soundtrack is one of the ones that's on Spotify, so it might be easier to listen to than other ones.
Even though FTL isn't fucking available on anything but PC and iPad.
Yeah, get it on a tablet. It's so cool. on a
I want that
tablet.
game on Switch so bad. I just can't believe it's not on Switch.
It's weird because Into the Breach is on Switch.
I know.
So like, what the hell? Also great soundtrack. I think the same composer.
You guys want to go kill them with their guns?
Okay, here's the last one for games that keep you going, or soundtracks and games that keep you going.
Yeah, I'm wondering which one this is. I have a hunch, but hit me.
A game you might have heard of called Sayonara Wild Hearts.
Yeah, if you weren't gonna have this one in this category, I was gonna add it to this category. Yes.
Yeah, Daniel Olson and Jonathan Eng. I mean, I think like you could probably have this soundtrack in every category I have,
Hey,
but I
I'm not
feel
being
like
sneaky.
because it's
Turns out
if
it
it has to be
wasn't.
defined as one thing, it is a rail shooter or it is like an interactive
really good.
music video. But like you are progressing through it for the music. The music is the end goal. You're kind of going through a video, and when you reach an obstacle, it will kind of constantly loop the same part of the song. And talk about an upbeat soundtrack. This is like one of my favorite soundtracks to listen to if I just need to feel happy, or if I need to like, I either need a pick-me-up or I want to celebrate something. It's very emotional. It's not all fluffy, but like it's just so engaging and it's so exciting to experience.
Yeah, this is one of those soundtracks that, and I want to be very clear that I'm not saying that one thing is above the other, but it's one of those game soundtracks that has kind of like grown wings and flown out of being a video game soundtrack to me, and has just become like one of my favorite albums, just like in general. Like it's
Yes.
I think it's an incredible pop album. You know, regardless of its origin, I think just like by itself, it's a great piece of art. It's a great work, which is like stellar, because I can't really say that about a lot of game soundtracks. As much as, you know, I think of a lot of them very highly, and I'm talking about a lot of them that I think of very highly, not a lot of them stand fully apart from their game of origin in a way that makes me think like you could just hand this to anyone on the street and be like, here's a really good album, and they'd be like, oh fuck yeah, it is. and I think that the best way I could illustrate that is by the literal first moment of the game, when the narrator just kind of like utters a couple lines that like set the stage. And then it launches into the title screen, and I thought that the title screen, I got Apple Arcade like 2 days before it went live for some reason. I'm not really sure why. And the first thing I did was I downloaded Sayonara Wild Hearts because I was just so fascinated